Okay, let's jump right into this. You know, whenever we talk about artificial intelligence or robotics, the conversation almost instantly spirals into this generic robots are coming for our jobs storyline or some wild dystopian apocalypse. But if we peel back all that tech hype, there is a much older, honestly, much more grounded conversation going on. The real story here isn't about rogue code. It's absolutely a fundamental question of economic incentives. So, in today's explainer, we're going to strip away the sci-fi completely. We're going to look strictly at the macroeconomic reality of what actually happens when machines start doing an increasing share of the physical production in our economy, and how that completely rewrites the relationship between labor, capital, and ownership. To get there, here is our game plan for today. We'll start with the old economic relationship, move into the economics of robot labor, and then look at productivity and capital income. After that, we'll dive into the concept of the robot owner, before wrapping up with two very different potential futures: concentrated control and shared abundance. Let's get to it. Section 1. The old economic relationship. So, for practically all of modern history, human labor has been the absolute center of economic production. The engine essentially works like this, right? Humans work to help businesses produce goods and services. In exchange for that time and sweat, workers receive income, their wages. And then those same workers take their hard-earned income and act as consumers, buying the very goods and services those businesses just produced. You see, capitalism doesn't just need production, it desperately needs demand. It literally needs people with money in their pockets to buy things. For generations, this cycle has kept the whole system moving. But we are definitely entering a new phase now. And there is a huge, crucial distinction we need to make right up front between AI software and physical robotics. Software is currently out there automating knowledge work, stuff like research, coding, analyzing data, and administration. Physical robotics, though, that targets something fundamentally different. We're talking about the actual physical production and movement of goods: manufacturing, warehousing, transportation, construction, the heavy lifting. When machines start encroaching on physical logistics and production, the economic impacts shift dramatically out of the digital realm and right into the physical, nuts and bolts foundations of our supply chain. Which means we need to get our definition straight before we go any further. In economics, labor is the human effort used in production. Capital, on the other hand, refers to the productive assets used to make things. Think factories, software, infrastructure, heavy equipment, and yes, robots. So if robots end up performing an increasing share of our physical work, what we're actually witnessing is a massive structural expansion in the importance and capability of physical capital over human labor. Section 2. Economics of robot labor. Now, there is a massive misconception out there that robots are just automatically cheaper than human workers. Actually, scratch that. They really aren't. The economic calculation here relies on a highly complex balancing act. For a business to actually replace a human, the robot's upfront capital costs, its energy requirements, the ongoing maintenance, and all the software infrastructure, all of that has to be weighed directly against a human's wages, benefits, and, working hour limitations. Sure, a robot might be able to work around the clock with super high utilization rates, but it requires serious, heavy capital and infrastructure to pull off. The adoption of robots is driven purely by this financial incentive and productivity math, not just because a cool new technology happens to exist. Section 3. Productivity and capital income. Let's see how this builds into what we can call the chain of consequence. When a company deploys robotics, they automate tasks, which leads to higher productivity, meaning they can produce way more output with fewer human hours. Naturally, this lowers their labor requirements. Because the physical work is increasingly being done by machines, the economic returns shift heavily toward the people who own the capital. Ultimately, this creates an entirely new income distribution across society, which, as you can guess, completely redefines economic power. Harvard economist Richard Freeman actually hit the nail on the head with his third law of Robonomics. It boils down to this: labor income comes from providing work, capital income comes from owning productive assets. As technology reduces the cost of production, the entire balance shifts. Income will increasingly come from the ownership of robots and capital rather than from human labor. And here's the kicker. While total economic output grows, bringing us lower prices, higher margins, and totally new industries, a massive share of those financial gains ends up accruing disproportionately to the folks who actually own the capital. But hold on, remember that cycle of capitalism we discussed a minute ago? This system absolutely requires demand. So if the balance shifts too far away from labor income, who on earth buys the goods the robots are making? Well, historically, when society faces a demand gap like that, we just slap a band-aid on it using debt. We use credit cards, personal loans, buy now, pay later schemes, anything to keep consumer spending high, even when our actual wages are stagnating. But let's be real, debt is just your future income already claimed. It's a temporary patch, not a long-term structural solution for a highly automated economy. Section 4. The robot owner. Okay, I want you to picture a hypothetical company operating exactly 1,000 autonomous robots. These machines are out there doing the heavy lifting across manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, and quality inspection. In this scenario, the physical work is entirely divorced from the human owner. The owner isn't lifting a single box, right? They aren't assembling a single part. The machines are doing the whole shebang. So, what exactly determines the owner's economic return here? Well, their return is dictated by robot utilization, overall market demand, maintenance costs, and honestly, simply the fact that they hold the legal rights to the capital itself. And if you're sitting there thinking, okay, but this is decades away, you might be surprised. Existing legal frameworks are already adapting to this right now. Take the Republic of the Marshall Islands, for example. They've established a digital LLC structure specifically for decentralized autonomous organizations and algorithmic management. Under this current functioning law, an AI agent can literally act as the operational manager of an LLC. That legal entity can hold intellectual property, open bank accounts, sign contracts, and bear liability. We already have the legal wrappers in place today to allow autonomous robot fleets to operate and hold assets as distinct economic entities. It's wild. Which brings us to absolutely the most important question of this entire explainer. Who owns the machines? Seriously, technology alone does not dictate our economic future. Ownership does. If machines can perform more and more of the physical work, how does society distribute those massive economic gains? Depending on who holds the legal title to these incredibly productive assets, our future splits into two very different yet entirely plausible paths. Section 5, Scenario 1, Concentrated Control. In a future where a relatively small number of firms or individuals own the vast majority of these productive robots, a very specific pattern emerges. First, we get incredibly high corporate productivity and drastically lower production costs. This obviously leads to extremely high capital returns for the owners. However, because fewer workers are required overall, aggregate wage income across the board drops, which results in much weaker consumer demand. Ultimately, this path leads to a massive, unprecedented concentration of both wealth and economic power. This creates a really fascinating core economic paradox. Think about it. For an individual company, the incentive is obvious, right? Cut labor costs to increase your margins. But if every single company does this at the exact same time, they severely damage the broad consumer demand that the entire capitalist system relies upon. It's like a giant puzzle where the pieces don't fit. What makes a single company hyper-efficient could paradoxically starve the wider macroeconomy of consumers who actually have money to spend. Section 6, Scenario 2, Shared Abundance. But here's the thing. Concentrated control is definitely not inevitable. The exact same underlying technology could yield a wildly different outcome if the ownership and distribution models change. In this shared abundance scenario, the immense productivity gains of robotic labor are distributed much more broadly. Now, this doesn't mean humans suddenly become economically useless. Instead, it could translate into much shorter work weeks, wider capital ownership, maybe through new corporate structures or citizen dividends, significantly lower costs for everyday consumer goods, and far better funded public services through entirely new taxation models. Actually, some economists and theorists take this idea even further, pointing to the concept of post-scarcity or surplus economics. This is a theoretical economy where extreme automation, combined with open-source design and plummeting production costs, makes basic goods effortlessly abundant. The total necessary labor of society is reduced to an absolute minimum, and our primary economic challenge literally shifts from managing scarcity to managing incredible widespread abundance. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this absolutely crucial takeaway. Nothing about artificial intelligence or robotics automatically guarantees a dystopian collapse, and it doesn't guarantee an immediate utopia either. The future isn't going to belong to AI itself, it is going to belong to whoever owns it. When you look out at the future of work, we have to stop asking only what the technology can do. We need to start asking, if machines can perform more of the work, how does society distribute the economic gains? Will our future be one of shared abundance or concentrated control?